So this was Josiah's topic, but I was going to ask you, do you think when you have your fights like between left and right online, do you feel like you're doing it proportionately to the like political threat or power that they have, or do you have like other incentives or in your head or like other reasons
it depends
for
on
doing it?
what issues are popular at the time. It depends on who's existing in my particular sphere, and it depends on what we're in particular focusing on.
That's what I feel like I struggle with, is because when I used to watch you fight with leftists for the last like few years, I never really understood like the disproportionality of it, especially because of your leanings like politically, or more, probably definitely more left than right. But then I noticed myself, for some reason, there's just something so much more tempting about going after like far left extremism than right wing. But I wonder if that's because it's people that you hold to a higher standard, or if it's just because it's like it feels worse when critique comes from your own side.
Yeah, I think it's a combination of two things. I think one is that they're just in your area more. Like it would be weird if you went to the Republican National Convention or something and you took out your phone and you were fighting, with far left people or something, when you have so many Republicans around you to fight with, And then two, I think that because you are supposedly aligned more on core values, the differentiation in applied values is a lot more irritating. If you're like if you're a 15 an hour far left person and you're sitting next to a Republican who doesn't believe in minimum wage, and it's like, okay, well, you're dumb. But if you're sitting next to somebody that purportedly shares your values, they're center left or whatever, or another far left person, and they don't want a 15-hour minimum wage, well, now there's like a huge problem. Like the Republican's not supposed to agree with you. The Republican's not supposed to support minimum wage. It's not part of their values. But another left-leaning person like you should be. So something is really wrong with them or really wrong with you. And that's, I think, where a lot of the fighting comes from.
I always feel like when it comes to being in that specific area as well, because when far left people, they don't really I don't think they have really any power in like national politics, at least here in America. But this is one of the last countries on earth you're going to see like a socialist or communist revolution. But in social media, like in our space, they seem to have quite a lot of power, or at least a lot of influence. But at the end of the day, these are mostly people who are probably not going to vote, or if they do vote, they'll probably just vote Democrat.
Yeah,
So.
I was going to say their influence is definitely overblown. I feel like a lot of people just rather be keyboard warriors and go outside and actually like canvass and try to get people to vote. And
Whereas Republicans online, even though they're maybe harder to find or to get immediate access to, at least for me, they do vote and they do want to like maybe march on the Capitol again with a bit more practice this time.
Outside of like the burnt out hippie movement and those types of like older type of far leftists, there are more far leftists among very young people, but there's a few problems. The first problem is those people don't really turn out to vote at the same rates of much older people who are not far left at all. And so even if at a higher percentage on average they are on the far left, if you, number one, reject electoral politics, then you're not going to turn out. So that's going to be a problem. You're not able to use that tool in your toolbox. And number two, just young people don't turn out generally. So I think that both of those things also further stunt the far left's ability to influence at least electoral politics directly. They do other things like direct action. I don't know how particularly effective that has been in the last few years, though.
I always feel like, I don't know if you two get this, I feel like it's so much harder to pull over or to like get changed minds from far left people, because at the end of the day, you're just really like a less, from where they're starting, you're just a less ideologically pure version of what they are. Whereas with right-wingers, I feel like there's much more opportunity that you're actually exposing them to arguments that they maybe just haven't heard before. I don't know.
I strongly disagree. I feel like with a lot of right-wingers that I talk to, like I think a lot of them are just operating on a completely different basis of just like factual, a different basis of reality, or even like such a different base of morality. And even if you can introduce them to new arguments, I think a lot of them have incorporated, and this happens with the left too, but basically people incorporate these parties into their identity, and I think they're scared to change their identity. So then, like, it doesn't matter what you say. They've defined themselves as a Trumper, as a pro-MAGA, America first. So I think there's like a deeper psychological issue going on here that you have to like have these people either expand their social network, their communities, get in touch, like having friends on literally a different side. Otherwise, just giving them these arguments, I don't think is enough to make them change their identification.
Yeah, but I just from personal experience of just like because I'm guessing once you do enough arguments, you get a bunch of like emails or DMs being like, "Oh, you changed, but I'm from this. I'm from this political alignment, and I used to believe this, but you've changed my mind on this, or you've made me consider this differently." I feel like getting that from like center right people or maybe right wing people is much easier than getting it from far left people. Is that the same with you or you?
I've had a lot more center-right people, sometimes libertarians, because I do go to libertarian conventions, come up to me and say, okay, you changed my mind about this foreign policy issue, or maybe we should send her when we do that. But I don't really convince many far left people. I think, though, probably at a higher rate than you guys, because I hang out, or at least I talk to people, and I'm willing to fight them on this a lot more.
I think you're right, but for a hidden reason. I think it depends on the type of content you engage with and who you argue with and which fan bases you're interacting with. They give you an ability to kind of persuade people. So when I was debating a lot of far left people, I actually got quite a few emails from people saying like, hey, like I used to be a big Hassan fan, I used to be a big Russian. Some people here say like, oh yeah, I was falling into the really far left, like communist, whatever bullshit, and now I'm not anymore. And when I was fighting a lot of red pillars or a lot of far right people, I would get just the opposite. When I'm like going on my rounds like debating Nazis, I'm not getting far left people being like, hey, thank you so much, I was about to become a full-on socialist. I'm getting people on the right. So I think that you do have a higher chance right now on the internet of convincing people on the right than convincing people on the left, but it's not because people on the right are more easily convinced. I don't know if that's true. I'm not even sure. That's probably not true, but it's probably just more because those are the only people willing to fight with you. Like it's pretty hard for me to turn Hassan or Vosh fans when they will never talk to me, which is like a good strategy on their part, because if they did, they would lose fans.
But I'm guessing
or if they
like
get caught.
some of your React videos get more views than the Hassan or Vosh videos themselves.
Yeah, but that's not
So it's
Hassan
just
and
the-
Vosh
yeah.
fans coming to watch my videos. Those are
Okay.
other people that like to dunk on the lol cows
Yeah, that
and
makes
watch me
sense.
farm the nice milk from both of them
Yeah.
into my buckets.
So that's what, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you do that, it's not really with the mission of trying to bring far left people into a more
No,
sensible
honestly, God, I'm just trying to afford my child
entertainment.
support.
Yeah, okay,
you
yeah.
know. It's a
I
rough
thought
one
that. I
out
just
there.
wanted to know. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
No, but I
Makes
mean,
sense.
truly, like the audiences that you'll convert are going to be reflective on who you're fighting with, I think, at any given point in time. If I were to go on a tear, like right now, so like for Israel-Palestine is the thing I'm debating a lot. I'm getting a decent chunk of pro-Palestinian people that are saying certain things, like, oh, I was like really, anti-genocide and I'm pro-genocide of all the Palestinians, stuff like that. All the very far left people. But when I have, I've had one or two arguments, I think, with Israeli people, and I've gotten a couple people, I think literally a couple, I think just two, that have emailed me and they're like, hey, I never really thought about like the settlement stuff as much before, or like, hey, I can kind of see like how if you're a Palestinian and you've lived in, essentially apartheid conditions for 60 years, how maybe a good plan to a horrible feeling of being trapped somewhere.
Yeah,
and never
but
to get out.
that's what I worry about, is because as far as the pro-Hamas left go and all that, again, I don't know exactly how much influence they have, but as far as like the pro-settlement or like hardline Zion, I think they do actually have a lot of influence. There's the whole thing now about how, I guess it's like X number of Israelis would be okay with settling back in Gaza, like moving settlements back in, and it's not a majority, but it doesn't have to be a majority. It just has to be enough that they would do it, and there needs to be the right government in place to not stop them, which I think is.
Or to encourage them.
I think that's quite possible. Yeah, I think like if they started setting up camp within a few months, would Netanyahu's government really stop them or try to like evict them? Probably, maybe
Come
not.
down to international pressure.
And that's quite. So I feel like again, as far as like tangible threats, like the very extreme right pro-Israeli side, I think is really, really dangerous right now. But at least in my own personal space, I feel like I have to go out and actively seek that. Whereas finding pro-Hamas leftists, like they just appear everywhere. They're just like, there's the first thing in my feed on Reddit and Discord and Twitter. They're the first ones in my chat asking for debates. And as far as finding like a right-wing like Israeli to argue with, I actually have to go and seek it out.
I think
do you feel like you have the same issue, or do you just feel like you're just more aligned with Israel and that's why you end up? Or
No, I mean, it just comes down to who's available to debate. I would love to debate that traveling. Is his name Traveling Israeli? I always say
Traveling Israel, yeah.
Oh yeah, that guy.
But he doesn't want to debate, yeah.
He doesn't?
No.
Wow.
No. Probably because things like the settlements are completely and totally indefensible, or Israel's like really aggression, expansion, whenever they have the opportunity to do so, and any far-right Zionist would know that. So,
I think.
Well, I was going to ask, when I saw that list of names on the Palestine-Israel debate suggestions from Lex, so like on the Palestine side, you've got like Finkelstein, and on the right-wing side, on the Israel side, there's you, there's Benny Morris, but then there's also Ben Shapiro, and like I'm just wondering, like if there were the right combination of pro-Israel people, do you feel like you would feel more comfortable on the pro-Palestine side? Or
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I would never, because Lex was asking me for partners or whatever, and I was like, I'm not doing that debate with Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to end up siding probably with Finkelstein more. What were you were going to say something like?
Yeah, I think a lot of young people, particularly when it comes to young people getting radicalized and like really quickly radicalized about topics they don't know much about, I think a lot of it is social media specifically and how the algorithm works, on how it'll suck you into a rabbit hole where it'll show you exactly what you want to see, whatever. Make sure that you stay on the website, so it keeps giving you that information. And people talk about things like the added context on Twitter, but those things get added like 2, 3, 4 days after the fact, after 90 to 95% of the people had already seen the post. And in these social media bubbles, not only can you get misinformed just due to the fact that, you know, social media has lower journalistic standards of excellence than most published media, there's also the problem of course, being trapped in a rabbit hole where everybody around you agrees with you, and then you go in the real world or you see somebody who doesn't, and it makes you completely flip out. It's impossible for you to register or understand it.
How did your canvassing go?
I think in general my canvassing went well. Obviously there's a lot of doors that you knock that nobody's home, but when you do find the people that are there, it's nice to hear them when they're like, yeah, like I voted, or yeah, I'm registered to vote. It's like, hell yeah. A lot of them said that, actually, it was quite interesting. A lot of them said that their number one issue that they cared about most was democracy, funny enough. So I was surprised to hear that.
Is that where you learned that? Were you canvassing
People
together?
care about democracy?
Yeah.
Unironically, yeah, it was kind of cringe. I said it to a couple people. I was like, that's really cringe. You should have seen this one dude. I knocked on the door, and he came out. He was a young guy. Brown, can I say that? Yeah, and he opens the door.
Yeah, you can say that.
And I'm like, oh, wow, hey, how's it going? And he's like, very, very young, okay? This guy's like mid-20s. And I'm like, hey, you know, are you all registered to vote? He's like, absolutely. You know, me and my whole household are. And I'm like, oh, cool. What's the most important issue for you guys that you guys are voting on? And he looks at me and he's like, let me tell you about Operation Cast Lead. And I was like, oh my God. I had my Scars of War, Wounds of Peace book with me and everything. I threw my backpack on the ground. I must have been fist fighting for like 20 minutes before Aaron finally pulled me off and went to the next house. It was crazy.